I'm going to show you how to make a loom knitted knocker, and it's knitted flat, and then you're going to sew it up in such a way that you hardly even notice the stitch is there. So what we're going to do is you're going to need your CinDWood fine gauge loom, and it's 56 pegs, and you're going to need 2 stitch markers. You're going to put your first stitch marker on the 24th peg, and then you're going to count 9 over and put 1 on that peg. You can use jewelry bits for the marker to keep up with what row you're on and when you're decreasing. And you're going to want to use the Ultra Prima Fine yarn to make these with. And basically, if you're going to make these, you make sure you're using a very fine yarn. And so this will vary. The first marker and the second marker will vary depending on the size cup. But I put all these notes to where to put your marker in on the PDF. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off doing a drawstring cast on flat, but we're going to keep in mind that we're not going to tighten it at all. We're not even going to drawstring it. We're going to keep it loose. We're not going to touch it because you're going to be putting the spacing in between the stitching back on the pegs. You can see that kind of in there. And then we're going to send a needle weaving in and out to where you hardly notice there's stitching at all. So what you're going to do is you're going to, here's your first peg, you're going to pull back. You're going to need to because, hold on. Okay, you're going to pull back some. And this is your first peg, and you're going to weave in and out. All the way over to the second stitch marker. Which means you're going to pass your first one, which is right there. Okay, there's your second one. And then you're going to push down the ones with the loop you just made. Okay. Now you're going to wrap it around to go back the other direction. So you're going to toss the loop over on every other peg, and then as you can see, it creates a loop for each individual peg. And this is your drawstring cast on. And you're going to see why I suggested to make it a little looser on the end. Okay, we're at our first peg right there. Alrighty. Now we're going to go in and we're going to knit a single row. This works the same for all the cup sizes. So you're just going to go in and we're going to do a flat knit. And how this works is you take that bottom loop and you toss it and pull it into the center. Okay, you toss it over and you pull it into the center of the loom. And that keeps the stitching loose enough where you can continue. The flat knit is important because it is the tightest knit you can get on your looms. We are officially set up to start. That's our setup. Just go ahead and push those loops down. Okay, so at this point, you're going to knit to your first marker. There's your first marker. And you're going to purl at the marker. And there's your purl. Then you're going to knit to the end. Okay. You've now knitted to the end, so shove your loops down. Now what you're going to do is you're going to skip the last one you knitted, so you're skipping it. You're going to wrap it around and you're going to skip it. And you're going to knit a couple. I knit about 4. Then I go down and I shove that down and I take my stitch marker and I put it on that first peg because we're going to keep up with which pegs we're skipping. And then we're going to knit over to our stitch marker, our first one. Going to purl it. And then you're going to knit to the end. Push your loops down. Okay, then we're going to knit to our stitch marker, first one, and then we're going to purl it and then knit to our last marker. There's our stitch marker. Remember, we need to purl it. Always keep in mind you're going to purl that stitch marker right there. That tells you your top from your bottom. Okay. So there's the peg before your stitch marker. Shove your loops down. Then you're going to skip the peg you just knitted, toss a few loops over, which I toss about 4. Then I move my stitch marker over 1 peg. Then I'm going to knit to my stitch marker, purl, and knit all the way back, and then I'm going to repeat going all the way back, purl all the way to here, skip, move my stitch marker over. I'm going to do that 3 more times, so go ahead and pause the video and complete it until you see in the written pattern where we're going to start skipping at the bottom section. Just go ahead and pause the video and complete however many rows you need to until we start skipping on the bottom. And you'll know because it's the shorter section where your purl is. Okay, we have completed up to that point. We're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see there's... Okay, we're going to count from that point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you see there's where my marker is. So now that we're to that point, we know that we're going to start skipping over here. So what we want to do is skip 1, knit over a few, about 4, push down, take your other marker and put it right there on the end one we just skipped. Okay, we're to just before our last marker. Push our loops down. Skip that first one. In about 4 or 5. Push it down and move it over 1. And then we're going to go to our first stitch marker, purl 1. Here's our purl 1. And then knit to the marker that you just put in. There's our last marker. You're going to skip that one. You're going to knit over 4 or 5. The reason why I suggest knitting over a few, because if you move that stitch marker over too soon and then you start knitting, it'll pop off and it just doesn't stay. It stays better if you knit over a few. So knit there, purl 1, and then knit over here to your stitch marker. And you're going to be continuing this process on both sides now rather than the one side until you have reached your purl stitch on the back side. And I'll explain that here in a second. There's that one. So we'll skip that one. Knit over about 4 or 5. Move that stitch marker over 1. Okay. And there's your stitch marker. Alright. What I mean now is that you're coming over every row and you notice that you're decreasing in a sense. You're going to be doing the same thing on this side. But you know you're done decreasing when this marker gets right beside this purple stitch marker here, which is your purl peg. So what you're going to do is you're going to pause the video and you're going to get up to that point. Okay, we've gotten up to the point where our marker is right here, right beside our purl peg, and I've already gone and I've already decreased 1. Okay, and I'm already back. So what I'm going to do now is take the stitch holder off that peg and move it over to the next peg. What we're going to do is we're going to start going back and increasing on this side while we're still decreasing over here. So now we're going to knit that one. Then we're going to go in and knit and purl. Then we're going to knit over to our marker and still be decreasing on the top side. The bottom side has to be different is because it needs to be flat, and we need to be able to add or remove polyfill at preference, and so we're working on trying to keep it more open at the bottom. Wrap, skip one, knit a few, push down, put the marker on the next peg over. Purl, knit, then take your marker and move it over to the next peg, and then you're going to increase. You're going to go back the direction you came. Knit 2, purl 1, now that you can kind of see what we're up to, go ahead and continue this process until your marker here, actually you want to continue this process until your marker here is back here. So we've just decreased one, wrap, knit a few, move your marker over. I'll show you one more time, adding back in, and everything should line up for the most part. So you take that stitch holder, move it to the next peg, knit that peg, and then go back. So pause the video and complete to where this marker is back at the end again, and that means that this marker should be somewhere in here, but either right beside it or just a couple before. So go ahead and pause the video and complete that much, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I am 2 loops from my purl, and I'm all the way back to the end here. At this rate, we're going to take this stitch marker off and put it back over here for temporary, and we're going to be doing a knit row. So you're just going to knit all the way across back over to your starting point, but you're going to purl without one peg like we've been doing the whole time. Okay, we've just completed our first section, and there it is. So what you want to do now is you want to continue doing, you want to go back to the beginning of the video, and you want to start with the decreased row where you skip one and put the marker in. And do 5 rows, do it to where you have 5 pegs that you've done a skip on, and then start decreasing over here by 1, continue decreasing over here till you get to there. Repeat going in the increase while you're still decreasing. So go ahead and pause the video and complete 2 more sections, and then I'm going to show you how to do the cast off. So go ahead and pause and complete that much, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I've completed both my sections, and now I have 3 sections, as you can see here. And now we want to add our drawstring cast on back to the pegs, because we're ready to finish up the boob. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to go to the opposite end to which we began. So there's our tail right there. We're going to go to the opposite end, And what we're going to try to do is find, well, that looks like the first one. There should be one more, and you want to try to find it. Simply just finding that first one's a little bit of a challenge. But it's starting to look like that's our first one. Okay. When you look at your drawstring cast on, you'll see these are your actual stitches here. And this is the space between your stitches. And this is what you're going to be putting back onto the pegs. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take one, because the end one, you can end up too short on the other side. So I'm going to pick up this end one here and put it on the peg. Okay. After you get that first peg set in, it's pretty easy to keep moving. So for instance, that's your next one. And then you pull it out some, and you can see your next one, which is going to be right there. Pull it out, you'll see your next one's right there, and it's going to want to curl up, so that's where the pulling it every time you add a new loop on. So pull it, and there is your next one. Pull it again. There's your next one. Pull. There's the next one. And you want to do this all the way over to the other side. Until you have all the spacers in there. Sometimes you might need to, there it is. So you're going to do this all the way over. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to take your extremely long tail over here and weave it in such a way that you hardly notice your connection. Okay, we're going to take our threaded needle, and as you can see, your working yarn you're going to be using is coming from the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to send the needle up from the bottom to the top. Get our tail out of the way from our drawstring cast on. Okay, pull it up through the bottom through the top. Then that's what we're going to call a purl. And then what we're going to call a knit is when you send the needle through the top, through the bottom. Then you go through and you're going to knit through the top loop. You're going to knit through the top loop again. The start is a little bit tricky, but once you get going, then you'll be fine. Then you're going to go purl through the next loop. So you're going to send it up, and then you're going to purl through the bottom loop of the previous peg. Then you're going to knit through the bottom loop of the second peg. Then you're going to knit through the top loop of the second peg. Purl through the top loop of the third peg. Purl through the bottom loop of the second peg. Knit through the bottom loop of the third peg. And and knit through the top loop of the third peg. Now, what to keep in mind is you're doing a purl, purl, knit, knit, and it's at a diagonal. So your first purl is on the next peg, your next purl is on the bottom previous peg, and your next knit's on the bottom next peg, and then you knit again. So we're ready to move on to the next peg. So we're going to purl the top loop, purl the second loop on the previous peg, and then knit. My personal opinion, this is the most tedious part of the boob. Now we've just done our first knit, we got to do a second knit. So remember, you're doing purl, purl, knit, knit. So we've just done 2 knits. What do we do next? We do a purl, and we're going to the next peg. Purl. We've done 1 purl, we're going to do another purl. So we go to the previous. There's our 2 purls. And then we're going to do a knit. There's our first knit. And there's our second knit. Then we're going to do a purl to the next one. So remember that a purl always starts your fresh peg. Always start your fresh peg. And then you remember, if you purl with your fresh peg, that you're going to purl again on that bottom loop. Then you're going to knit the bottom loop of the peg you just added, and to finish that peg off, you knit before you go to the next peg. Okay, so you're going to continue doing this all the way to the other side. Purl, purl, knit, and knit. And you're going to do this all the way to the other side. And then when you're done getting all the way to the other side, you're going to sit here and you're going to go back and you're going to tighten the loops up. Once you tighten all the loops up, as you can see, I'm going in and doing that. once you tighten all the loops up, then you take them off the pegs, because you'll have tied them all off and you'll have done your cast off. You'll take them off all the pegs, and then you'll be done. And then you can stuff it to desired firmness, and that is how you make a loom knitted knocker. So you go in and you tighten like that all the way across, and this way you don't notice it and you can see it easier. If you try taking them off before tightening, then it becomes more difficult. It's easier to tighten on the loom, and particularly since it's fine gauge, you're not going to have to worry about it as much as if it was a larger gauge. Then you would take it off the loom first, but because it's fine gauge, tighten your loops first, then take all the loops off, and then you're done. You should hardly see a sewn together cast on. And this is not the proper Kitchener cast off on the loom. There's another way of doing it where it's completely invisible, and the person who came up with this, who figured it out, was Brenda Myers, and I'm going to include her side street pattern in the box below the video. If you want to know how to do a proper Kitchener cast on, go to her page and that I provide, and get the side street hat, and she goes through a pictorial of how to do the cast on and what to do and how to add the loops back and how to weave it in and everything. This isn't a proper Kitchener cast on. She does a proper Kitchener cast on, but for the purposes of trying to simplify it as much as I can, I just did the drawstring cast on and then do this weaving. So you want to know how to do it properly? Go to the link below and look at her side street hat pattern. Okay, here's what it is completed without stuffing. This is what it should look like, and it'll have a little point at top, and when you go in to stuff it, it'll be like a nipple. So what we want to do is we want to take some sort of hook and tuck that end piece in. So, and then with our threaded needle still that we finished with, we're going to do a weave in and out to allow it to draw string together after we stuff to our desired stuffage, I guess you'd call it. And this way you can close off the bottom pretty good. Just generally weave it out. It's nothing precise. You just want it to be able to close up when you're done stuffing it. Okay, we're back to beginning. Okay, now we're going to stuff. I'm going to stuff it pretty firm. Try to even it out as best you can. Okay. And then once you have it, what you're going to do is you're going to close up that bottom. You're just going to drawstring it together. And then you'll just stuff this away. And if you're donating, make sure you leave that drawstring open so that anybody can go in and adjust it as needed. But there's the nipple area. So you have your nipple area, and there you go. That's how you make a loom knitted knocker.